I'm Alice from Experts for Expats, and our mission is to take the stress and complexity out of living abroad. I'm joined today by property specialist Daniel Shillito, who helps people relocate to Italy. In our conversation, Daniel's going to be sharing his experience as an expat in Italy, advice for people considering a move there, and some examples of the challenges he helps expats overcome. Hi, Daniel. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we delve into our conversation, please do introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure, thanks, Alice. It's great to be with you today. So Daniel Shillito, I'm in Milan in Italy. I'm naturally an expat because people can tell by my voice that I'm not born and bred here in Milan necessarily. But we moved here as a family some 15 years ago. So we've been here for quite a while. My children have grown up basically being Italian. My wife's Italian. So we've been a part of this country for 15 years now. And I run my own business, D&G Property Advice, and we help people invest in and buy property in Italy and move to Italy and invest and retire.
And what was it about Italy that attracted you? Why did you choose that as the country you wanted to move to?
Well, for us, it came to us. I know a lot of people make conscious decisions about where they want to live, the lifestyle they want to enjoy. But for us, it was natural, of course. I fell in love with an Italian, right? So we've from that point, we've always had a choice. We're going to stay where we came from, which was Australia, where I come from, which we did for many years, actually. We lived together as a family there for 10 years. But then we decided that we wanted to move to Italy, to join two families together, to have a different experience for our children growing up, and then give them the choice later on whether they, what they wanted to do. So I love the country too. When I traveled as a tourist, I really wanted to do more and to see more. So for me, it wasn't such a difficult decision beyond the family and love reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, that's so often the case, isn't it? Like we don't plan where we end up in life. It's just circumstances take us to a place. And I mean, how much preparation did you do before you moved? Did you do a lot of research kind of into the area, or did you already have an idea because of, your wife obviously knew the country. Did you already have an idea of where it was that you wanted to move to?
Yeah, look, we had a good idea because, like many millions of Italian citizens, they tend to grow and live as they're in the same place as their parents and their family community. So I knew we were going to be within touch. When we came, we had babies that needed taking care of, and we were still in our working careers, of course. So my wife's parents lived not far from Milan, so we knew we were going to be in this area. Obviously, we preferred to be in the city for work purposes rather than in the country areas. So, and I've been here a couple of times before, so I kind of knew a little bit of what to expect, but I couldn't know everything that I should have expected. That takes time to adjust to. But yeah, I mean, ideally, there's so many places in Italy that you could live, I think, personally, and that I could choose to live, and that we may live in the future. I don't see it as a permanent choice, but we're here now. Our kids go to school here. They have more choices and opportunities in Milan because it's a big city and fairly international. So yeah, the preparation wasn't that in depth, to be honest. It was more intuitive and just working out that, realizing that I was going to, personally for me at least, was going to have to adapt and learn and change as soon as we landed.
What are three things that you wish you had known before you moved to Italy?
I think that the number one thing is that the cultural differences are real. Humanity is everywhere, and humans are more or less the same in terms of we all have desires, and we want to work, we raise families and these kinds of things. But the way we do them and how we do them and what time we invest in different parts of our lives and how we relate to each other and what we expect from life is very different between cultures. And I find it's a significant difference. So those things are real. So I think underestimating them is something that people do kind of at their peril, if that makes any sense. So that's what one thing before moving and since moving that I realized. I think another thing that I wish I'd known is that there is a real formal culture. There's a formality here that you don't recognize when you're a tourist, right? Or if you come for long weekends or with family trips or what have you. When you're living and working and being in the community all the time, you realize, especially in a business sense, in a work sense, and dealing with other professionals in Italy, that there is a formality both in the language and the way you do things and how you do them that needs to be respected and is expected, you know. So that's definitely one thing. The other thing is, I think just that I found that it's important to be curious. And if you've got a curious kind of mindset and you're kind of observing things rather than judging maybe or comparing, then that's going to hold you in good stead. And that, you know, would have helped me more too, being conscious of that before I came. You know, I perhaps, you know, that's one thing that I wish I'd known probably better before moving.
What would you say was probably the biggest culture shock you experienced when you moved to Italy? You know, was there anything that you really weren't expecting that came as a bit of a surprise?
I think the overall approach to lifestyle and what's important daily and weekly in Italy, it was the biggest shock, and because you notice the difference when you're obviously not born in that culture. So coming from where I came from, for example, the differences here that was a shock is the attitude to lifestyle is so much more important, and it's almost like how work fits in with your lifestyle and what you want to do and how you do it throughout the year. You know, the attention to long weekends, if there's a public holiday before, during, then it's where you're going, what you're doing, and how you're going to plan for that, which is very much a part of the culture. The fact they have pretty much all of August off completely in Italy and treasure that. And it's been a long-standing tradition. So you just don't expect that normal work and business is going to happen for the middle 3 weeks or so of August. And similarly, at Christmas, there's a healthy break there, which sometimes looks like a shorter break, or it should be, but it always ends up being just a little bit more here and there. And so it's I think people are conscious of, you know, not living for work, but working to live. And you know, it's quite often the case that personal life can encroach upon business life, so it's dealt with differently here than what I've been, and that's been a shock for me for sure.
And thinking about the expats that you now help, that you now work with, what are some of the most common challenges that expats might face when they are looking to move to Italy?
Okay, well, number one, without doubt, is something that probably speaks for itself, and that's the public administration in Italy, or bureaucracy, I guess, that needs to be navigated and negotiated sooner or later. If you're fortunate, you've got someone that can help you with the first steps and understanding what's required and how to go about it, and maybe even just speaking the language with the authority that you've got to engage with to get something done. You know, really helps if you've got someone that can help you. But sooner or later, you're going to be doing that yourself, I think, the longer that you're here. So that's something that people need to adapt to. And I think it's important the attitude that people take towards it before you arrive and when you're here. And if you recognize that it is what it is, then the question is going to be, how am I going to respond and react to that and approach it? And if you've got the attitude and the approach that recognizes there's going to be challenges. It's not going to go like maybe I hope and expect it will go. Sometimes it will. Sometimes you'll be pleasantly surprised. So, you know, that old adage, have low expectations. When something goes well or is delivered quickly, then you're going to be happier. So I think that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, challenge that I'd say that people will face. I think too, the time that things can take to get done, and not maybe having all things in one place, like saying there's going to be a reference where someone's going to teach me and tell me everything I need to know about this process or to do this in the society, and it's on a website maybe ready, or one person at this place is going to tell me. Italy doesn't have that kind of culture. It just lays that all out in a kind of efficient approach, because efficiency itself is not really a goal within the Italian culture. That's what I would say. And that's not good or bad or whatever. It's just different. It's just the way it is. You know, other things like beauty and culture and passion and lifestyle are more important than lining everything up efficiently for the people, you know.
And so if an expat was just thinking about moving to Italy, you know, they're maybe in those early planning stages of thinking about the move, what advice would you give to them as the kind of first things to start thinking about and get in order?
Well, definitely your personal environment where you live is so important. Where you're going to be spending most of your day to day. You don't want to be stuck in a place where you thought was going to be one thing, going to be great, and then you got there, have your rental contract or purchase a property, and then discover that it's not, and the lifestyle is different than you expected. So I think um, coming and staying in the place that you're thinking of living, very important. Even if it's an Airbnb for a week, a couple of weeks, or a couple of times a year, different seasons, of course. In many places where there's more activity and economy and tourism in the summer months is going to look different in the middle of winter or come, Christmas time, January in that place. And if that's okay and you're happy with having a lifestyle which is kind of seasonal, because there's lots of, especially in the smaller towns, it's quite seasonal. So for 6 months of the year, it could be quite active, lots of things to do. And then other months it could be very quiet. And so you've got to ask yourself, is that what I want? Am I comfortable with that? Or I prefer being in a city where there's always something on all the time for 12 months of the year. Do I need that stimulation? Or can I create my own stimulation or amongst my family by being in a place that doesn't need that. And obviously, that also depends on your stage of life, whether you're working really hard, you're an employee, or you're running your own business. So you can't. There's no one rule fits for everybody. I wouldn't tell people, oh, you've got to live in Milan because it is what it is, or Rome, or even Florence. I think you can be happy in Italy in many, many different places, but it depends on you. And the beauty about Italy is that it's got something for everyone in very different corner of Italy, and there's so much to discover. Um, so I think that's the first thing is get your living situation clear, and then understand also obviously your financial situation in relation to taxes and tax reporting your taxes annually and looking at your investments and wondering how they're going to be taxed in Italy. If I'm bringing investments from another country or I've still got them when I'm here, how's Italy going to look at them? So you're not surprised. You don't get here, things are going okay from a lifestyle, social point of view, and then 9 months later you get an advice from an accountant, a tax accountant, which is a commercialista here in Italy, that says, oh, you've got to declare all that from overseas there, and you weren't aware about it, and now you've got this tax bill and things like that. So I think to have a meeting at least once or twice with a professional or an advisor that knows something that's on the ground in Italy that can tell you how it's going to look, you're going to feel much more comfortable and less shocked or surprised when you get here. The other thing too is be careful where you get your information from and who you listen to about how it works and what it would be like. I think there's a lot more variation in experience in Italy, right? And because you don't have that thing I spoke to before, like a one-stop resource that shows you how everybody does things and how many steps it takes and a predictable outcome, you've got different people having different experiences and different outcomes. So if you're looking at a social media post on living in Italy on Facebook or LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever, you could get a strong, passionate description of someone's experience and think, great, it looks like it's going to be fine for me. Or if it's a negative experience, oh dear, it's going to be terrible. Whereas it's actually a trap to just simply believe that experience is going to be yours. And it varies, it can vary immensely, but also your preparedness as well can help you either avoid or take you to that kind of experience that person has had. So yeah, I think that's another thing that's important. Be careful you listen to someone who perhaps has had experience with many, many cases, probably because I've got clients that have experienced lots of different things. And so that you can be better prepared no matter what happens, rather than jumping in, assuming something because of something someone told you, a few months ago or in a post online or what have you.
What about some advice for people who've maybe just moved? They're maybe experiencing a bit of culture shock for themselves. What's a great way for expats in Italy to kind of go about settling in, meeting people, getting to know the local area and making it start to feel like home?
That's a fantastic question, and it applies probably for anyone moving anywhere, right? Not just Italy. So there's probably some things that apply generically to every new country, looking out for special interest or in common interest groups. Like, there's normally theatre groups and there's drama groups, there's sport activity groups as well. There's writing groups, there's obviously guided tours of the towns and city that you're interested in. And I suggest doing those for sure. Not you can the bonus is that you can meet people who are interested in what you're interested in. They also might be an expat from the country you came from or another country that's similar. That and then you could discover activities together, and pretty soon if you end up being in contact with that person and they say, they might be doing something that you didn't think about doing. And therefore you could get a new experience. It could be a weekend away and you didn't realize that the coastal town was actually that's 2 hours away is actually easy to get to or easier than you thought and is more attractive because it has these things in it that you didn't know about and you won't know about it until you reach out to. Italy doesn't really advertise necessarily or market certain things about the living here. And you have got to discover them. So I think you've got to be prepared to get out there and discover them, and then you will meet people, and then they will share with you. Once you kind of break that ice, get into the local community, go down for a coffee at the local bar that's closest to your house. Don't avoid it because you maybe prefer the Starbucks flavors, which is 20 minutes away or whatever. I mean, it might be better to go down there, not just because of the taste of the coffee, but just listen to what people are talking about, to learn some more Italian if you don't know Italian yet. Ask some advice from the barman. After 2 or 3 coffees, pretty much over a week or two, that barman will recognize you and he might start asking you a couple of questions. And before you know it, you're developing a relationship. And some of the best relationships that you have in Italy, I think, are from the local people you meet in the shops and stores and things that aren't necessarily deep, but they give you comfort. And also the Italian culture is such that people share openly about what's going on and they're honest about what's happening in their life. The simple thing of saying, hi, how are you? And wondering how people are going to respond. A lot of people respond, fine, I'm good. And they don't share, whereas Italians normally, if they're not feeling so good or if something's not going so well because of the weather or something going wrong with job or their health, they'll tell you, once you've met them a couple of times, and it's an endearing thing, I think. I mean, and it can be a shock to your culture if you don't come from a culture that does that. But I think if you're open to that and you're curious about that and you're prepared to share yourself, then you're going to be fine. You're going to integrate well, I think, no matter where you are. I'm not sure if that really answers the question, but that's what
No, I
comes to
love
my
that. I
mind.
love that. And it all comes back to what you were saying earlier about having that curious mindset and being open to learning new stuff and discovering new stuff. So, thinking about your work and how you help expats. So, how typically do you support expats who are moving to Italy? At what stage do they come to you, and what are the kind of challenges that you help them with?
We provide a different range of services, and with my business partner, Giovanni, we created this property advice business because we saw that there was a need, there was interests that weren't being met by expats and property investors, really, or retirees in being represented in the market and being help taken through the purchase process, which primarily focused originally on property. Okay, so if people wanted to buy a place, it's not a straightforward process that's easily observed, when you first arrive. And people have different opinions about how the best way to go about things. The number one thing we realize is that the transaction can take longer than expected. It involves more people than you expect, and you need to know what you are legally able to do, and how people expect you to behave and respond in relation to making offers and negotiating or doing any due diligence and that kind of thing. And so we help people with all those things that are involved in the purchase transaction, including from sourcing a property that might suit you and assistance with negotiating. It really is an advisor type approach. It's not an agency. It's an advice base. And then we've got financial advice experience and also some immigration and visa general assistance. Okay, we're not actually lawyers ourselves, but we have lawyers within our network and also immigration consultants. Obviously, we know a lot of real estate agents and that kind of thing. So after 15 years, we've built up a good network of people that we can lean on and pick and choose from to help our expats to make life easier and find trusted sources too. The people that we know, we won't deal with them unless we feel we can trust them, of course, and that everyone's interests are aligned and they're not acting necessarily only for themselves. And I think that's what helps make a safer landing, I suppose. And that's what we do to help expats for sure in Italy.
And you are part of the Experts for Expats partner network, which is why we're talking today. Um, and often expats will come to us at a point where they've exhausted all other avenues of help. Their situation is potentially quite complex. So I'm wondering if you can share an example of a challenging situation that an expat you work with found themselves in and how you supported them through it.
Well, there's plenty to think about, including people that come along and they hear about these financial attractive schemes that Italy creates with lower taxes if you move to a certain area, or there's Lavoratori Impatriati scheme, which is reduced taxes for people coming back and being or coming to Italy for the first time, being tax resident for the first time. How do they work? Will I get access to the scheme? But then practically, how do I even apply and get accepted? What does it look like? Is there an actual process, or do you just wait till the end of the year when your tax accountant fills the form for you? So some of those things, again, they're just not written clearly, simply, easily. And so we can help people navigate that and find it and make sure they're not being taxed too much from the beginning. Because if so, I've helped people in that respect. They haven't arrived, haven't had clarity about how to do it, then started getting taxed incorrectly, perhaps. So I've helped them to make sure that they can access the schemes and be taxed and not be overtaxed from the beginning. I think that's pretty important. There's another example that's coming to mind in property that people wouldn't really appreciate until you understand even just a little bit about how the property market works, you know. So one of the things is helping people when they are working on a contract to buy a property, and that is where you leave your deposit. You know, you put a deposit down, but what happens to that deposit while you're going through the process of due diligence, like a property inspection, that kind of thing. So we help clients by helping select the notary who's responsible for the conveyancing process. And the notary can accept a deposit from you until the conditions are met, that the property, you know, is in the condition that you expect, that the paperwork is in order, that it meets all planning regulations. And once you can tick that box, they can then release the deposit, or the transaction can move forward. But of course, if you find a problem there, you then need to have the ability to say, well, wait a minute, I didn't realize there were all these issues to deal with the property, perhaps, and maybe you want to think about this or stop the transaction. So you need to be able to bring that deposit back, you know. And we helped a client in a very delicate situation where they put quite a lot of money as a deposit down. And then they found, with the help of a technical engineer, came to the property and found these issues. Well, it was also more about what the cost of renovations were going to be to bring that property up to a modern state and to live in the way they wanted to live in it. And they had not expected that kind of investment at all. And so they really needed to withdraw from their commitment. And the contract allows it. However, of course, the selling side and the agent and that kind of thing, they weren't so keen on the contract not being fulfilled, you know. And because of our relationships and being able to choose the notary, we were able to contact the notary, explain the situation, and then of course it's up to the notary. Do they appropriately release the deposit and allow you to not have to follow through the contract, or do they wait for to discuss it with the other side? Do they consider it? And then the challenge here is that if you don't know who you're dealing with and how they work and what they're prepared to do, then things can just stop and be blocked. And that deposit could have been stuck there for a very long time. But instead, because of our relationship with the notary, their understanding of the contract and everything, they were able to release that deposit, no problem, very quickly. That client could basically breathe again, breathe out and say, okay, even though I did want to buy that property, I was authentic, there was some information I didn't have and I needed to get it, and you couldn't get it until you paid the deposit. They found the problem, but fortunately, they didn't have any financial loss. They could end it there and go and find another property. And unfortunately, these are the things that people don't realize when you come in and you find a property. There's just the agent there that's selling the property, and you don't recognize that these pitfalls that can occur during the process. So that was a massive value, I think, that we were able to add to that transaction for that client.
Yeah, that's a great example of how many moving parts there can be that aren't anticipated and how important it is to kind of navigate smoothly between lots of different parties when you're working with lots of different specialists. So yeah, that's a fantastic example. And before we end our conversation together today, which has been so brilliant, so helpful, is there anything else that you would like to say that you haven't covered to anyone who might be thinking about moving to Italy from another country?
I think that generally speaking, if you've got the passion and motivation, you've decided that this is what you want to do, I think what you want to just reflect upon is, do I also have the determination to see it through? Because if you wait for all the lights to be green before you leave the country and come to Italy, then you're probably not going to do it. It's going to take too long. You're going to get to a point where you say, okay, enough lights are green, or the first light or two is green. And I'm going to navigate it when I get there, and I'm going to find the resources I need if I don't have them already, because I'm really want to do this. And I would say, follow that dream, and it can be done. And there's so many people that have done it now anyway. It's not like it's you'd be the first person from the country you're coming from. Everyone from every country, pretty much, ultimately, there's been a case that have moved successfully to Italy. So it can happen. Doesn't mean that it won't be without bumps and things to negotiate, and for sure. But I say, of course, get advice and assistance on the ground in Italy from people that you feel you can trust and that have, I guess, I'd prefer, obviously I'm a bit biased, I suppose, but to have a professional approach to these issues and to property, to finances, to immigration, rather than perhaps simply an opinion based on, their experience or the experience of a friend. So if you get someone that has that overall experience, professional advice, then you're gonna be much safer, I would say, and be able to navigate your path in front of you a lot more easily.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today and
It's been a
sharing your
pleasure, Alice. Thank
insight.
you for creating this opportunity, and I hope people get some value out of it.
They definitely will. Thank you so much, Daniel.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you found this conversation helpful. If you're considering a move to Italy, we can help. Just go to expertsforexpats.com, find the service you need, share what you need help with via the contact form, and we'll introduce you to a person who is fully qualified to help you. Our introduction service is completely free, and after you have a discovery call with one of our partners, there is never any pressure to proceed with a paid service. Ultimately, we're here to help connect you with the support you need with your life abroad, whatever stage you're at.